Good Monday morning, everybody. This is Dr. Bill Williams on the Influencers Podcast, and we're here for another session. Today, we have something a little better than normal. We've got a real professional. I mean, I used to be a dentist, and I'm kind of an amateur podcaster, you might say. Well, I ran into a professional podcaster the other day, and I said, "You got to come on my show. Show me how it's done." Steve, Ramona, this is your time to show off how is a professional podcast host and coach going to do it.
Well, this is great. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I've got a lot to offer. I've found a unique way to do a podcast without that sponsor. I mean, I talked to a lot of people and they're, hey, how are you getting sponsors? And I actually just about ready to sign one up, my second one in a year, but that's not my focus. And I'll explain that more later in the show.
You're making money doing podcasting. You're helping people and you're coaching. You're doing a lot of things right.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels good because tell everybody it's a win-win-win. Podcast host, podcast guest, and the listener.
Tell me about how I got started and where are you today with it?
So I've been I'm a part owner of a digital business card company. I had clients. I'm always looking at ways to serve them. I used to put them on LinkedIn once a month. I'd promote a client. Hey, here's a plumber. Here's his digital business card. This is what he does. I still don't see a lot of people doing that. More and more, a little bit. But this was a new way. I've always wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't want to go to Google and DIY. I didn't have time. Didn't want to do 5 minutes here. I wanted to either jump into it or not do it, so I just didn't do it. And back in September, one of my clients for the digital business card company, Doug, introduced me to a group called Pantheon. So I met Kyle in the first 5 minutes. He says, Steve, what we're looking for is 1,000 of the top thought leaders and experts in the world to change the world. Like, let's keep talking. This is my life. This is what I've been doing for 15, 20 years. And we started talking, and I joined first week October, met Josh Tapp, who's now my business partner. And I can explain that in the future, how partnerships can grow from this. And the first thing I asked him, I said, Josh, I'm excited, like we all are when we're starting something new, especially a podcast. He goes, Steve, just record. If it's your phone, it's your iPad, just record shows, record content. 1, for practice, 2, to get comfortable, and 3, now you have content to share to the world. And that's what I did. I started doing 5 to 10, well, not 10. I do 3 to 5 podcasts a day, recordings. So right now I'm at 275 podcasts since October of 2022. I know most people probably don't have 50 in their lifetime, and that's okay. But the key to a podcast is consistency. People see as they subscribe some new and different material content. They get motivated, they get inspired, they get educated. So I started doing that. January, when I launched my podcast, I wanted to build a great group of shows, and it just took off. And what's happened is now that people have heard about my show through my network, and I'll talk about that in the future too, how important your network is, because that's where I started. That's the first. Well, the questions I get: time, money, how to do it, and how do I get guests? Well, everybody out there, you've got a guest in your contact list. You have 300 people in your contact list. Go through 4 or 5 that people are interesting. Of course, it's got to fit your niche, but like you're an influencers podcast, and I love that name, Dr. Bill. It's so perfect. So you would find influencers. People that it might be in their church, it might be worldwide, but just go out and find those people, because I've never had a person tell me no.
I'm not limited when I have the name influencers, because we can all influence.
Yeah. And that's a great, and mine doing business with a servant's heart. It's very general, so any niche works, because I'm about serving, you're about influencing, which is really, when you serve, you influence. But the power of all this that I've learned and that I coach is I start leveraging my guests. I get to know them. If I haven't met them before, which about 50% of the time I do, I start the first 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and get to know them, laugh, bring some energy to the show. They're excited already, but get to know them a little bit. What do you want to talk about? I hear you this in your background. Then you do your show, and I do 20, 25 minutes of what we think is a good time for people to listen. You can do an hour podcast. There's different roles, different ways to do it, but 2025 seems to fit me really well. And then when you get done, you've done a podcast, you've promoted them, you've learned about their desires, their pain points, what they do, what they're passionate about. That's a ton of information. The next 20, 30 minutes, I get to go, hey, what a great show. Yeah, it was great. We talk about the show. Hey, I heard about this, Tony. Hey, here's a resource for you. Here's a referral for you. Here's a tip. And now the floodgates open and they start going, wow, this is great. How can I help you? Well, I'm looking for a guest like this. I run $1 million mastermind. I'm looking for this. And now you got the reciprocity. And this is a new thing I learned yesterday at church, was planting seeds. A tree, we don't know who planted a seed. They were showing a tree that was 4,500 years old. Amazing. It's still in California, inland California. But somebody planted that seed 4,500 years ago. But how many people were under that tree using it for shade or just to rest, laying back on it? That's what you're doing when I do my podcast guest. So I lay a seed. Now, I don't partner every one of them, but I find them partners. And you know what? Referrals come to me 3 to 5 times a day and more for my podcast to partner up with me. Maybe it's a partnership for another person. And I've built a number of wonderful partnerships that will make me more money this year than I've ever made in my life, all from my podcast.
Now, that's a story that shouldn't go unnoticed. A lot of people make the mistake. Let's talk about a mistake. What was the failure story that you learned a lot from? Maybe it was how you got to monetize. In the past, maybe you were doing something that didn't monetize in the podcast space.
Yeah, and this is a great question. I love to ask this too, because we all have to. Mark Cuban, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, they've all had failure. I think Warren Buffett had 40 companies bankrupt. He's a multi-billion, trillionaire, whatever he is. In 2006 to 2013, I ran a very successful business, brick and mortar. But 2013, things changed in my business. I had to shut it down. I had to go to my dad Ralph, really rest in peace, and my cousin Jeff, who's been my mentor since I started at 18. And they're like, Steve, you got to close it. The money's not coming in. Here's what's going to happen. Well, what about my servant heart? I want to take care of my 2 employees. He said, they'll find something. This is not, you're making it worse when you can't give them paychecks. So that failure taught me never to give up on my podcast. Like, I was looking for sponsors when I started, and I wasn't getting them. And I would go to Josh, hey, he goes, just keep working at it. And that's what I did when I had a failure with the brick and mortar. I went to another business, became very successful. So failures can be a positive thing in your life. You just got to learn from them, like your question says.
If there's somebody that you consulted with as a coach, and they did things that didn't work, you saw it, and you said, here's what we need to do. What were those things they were doing? Give us a little insight.
Oh my God, audience, this is a great podcast host. I've been on a lot of shows. That's a great question because we don't talk about enough. The first one is shut up and listen. And I use shut up as harsh because a lot of people will shut up, but are they really truly listening to their guest? And these 3 people, once they got it, their show went from 50% to almost 90, 95% success rate because they learn. Go ahead.
You're saying the host talks too much about themselves.
Yes. And and the other thing they do, Dr. Bill, is they shut up, but they don't listen. Like, you might ask a question, how long have you been in business? And they say 15 years and their mind's somewhere else. And they go, so you've been in business for 3 years. That's great. An audience picks that up because exactly. Game changer. Right. The other thing is to worry about sponsorship and making money with your podcast. There's millions out there that people tell me there's too many podcasts out there. I said, yeah, but there's too many virtual networking groups. There's 5 million life agents. How many realtors out there? There's a place for everybody. And with the podcast, I use it as my new network. I used to run 6 networking groups and be the lead and, run them, love doing that. I've left them all and I love that. But my new network now is my one-on-one podcast. I can get to know these guests. And now I've had Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, extremely successful guy. I've had Tim Wright, who's won the Super Bowl with the Super Bowl champions. He's developed a headset with his partner to where deaf people can now hear. And I'm doing a direct mail program with a gentleman, Mike Hunsel, who was on my show, built a relationship. But months later, this came about and he remembered me. Now I'm part with that program and helping them grow it and bring in clients in. And that's going to be so successful for me. And I say this a lot, but then it goes back to the podcast. What was that central point? And for me, it's the podcast. I know it's not for everybody, but if you're thinking of doing a podcast, it is so powerful.
Figure out how to serve people, and they will bring back tons more than you put into them.
Yeah. Infinity loop. And I learned that lesson. There's another great story I learned from a guy who made $100 million serving. I'm like, God, that's crazy. He goes, yeah, I just serve my clients, and they bring me clients, and I'd serve people and they'd bring me a client, and high-end clients. He said, Steve, but you, because for 15 years, Dr. Bill, I've been serving, helping people. I work with guys for months for free, coaching them, helping them, give them resources. I thought I was serving them, and I was, but because the infinity loop, I stopped it halfway there. He said, Steve, you just turned them into the takers. Think about our audience. I'm giving them such great resources. When they ask me, how can I help you, Steve? Oh, I put my hand up. Oh, I'm good. I'm glad, enjoy those referrals, make that work with your YouTube, whatever tip or resource I give them or help with their computer. And I went, that was a light bulb moment. And I'm telling you, audience, that's huge. And you want to give and serve without how, why, or what. You may never know. But you know what will happen? Is a Dr. Ivan Meisner comes to my podcast, or somebody asks me, hey, I'd love for you to speak here at 30,000 people virtually. I was asked to do that. I'm asked to come back. We want opportunities to open. Here's a big tip. If that door opens, walk through it. Because guess what? You can walk right back out.
Yeah, you don't have is because you haven't asked.
Yeah. Oh, Dr. Bill, and that's the other thing. That's the other part of that infinity loop I wasn't asking. Now I am. It's like life is completely changed and everybody can do it.
Yeah, I like that. This leads right into that same question. I always want people to give me their best success secrets. What do you find is working for you best?
Get better 1% every day.
Incremental improvement.
Yep. Let's say you started January 1st. We're January 22nd, 2024. I always mess this up. 356 days in a year?
356, and tomorrow or this year is leap year.
Yeah, so it's even one more. So you're up 300, let's say 300%. You don't do 56 days, you don't increase, but you do 300 days. You've increased yourself personally and professionally 300%. Audience, think about that. Even 100%. By end of 2024, are you going to grow? But more importantly, you're going to make more money.
Yeah, let me tell you about a secret technique that I use. Just you made me think of it. In a book I wrote, international bestseller, $10,000 a day dentist. I tell one technique that's important is set a goal. Tell your staff what the goal is, and let them figure out how to make it happen. So one of my clients took that book, read it, told the goal to the staff and said, we're not going to just go up 10%. We're going to go up 20% this year, up to this $10,000 a day is our goal. And they didn't really believe it in their head, but they followed my advice. And sure enough, the staff took and ran and created that for the dentist. And all you do is just tell people what you want to do and let them help you.
And you know what you just did? You opened the door for them with that book, and it's a great book. Not everybody's going to walk through it. I know everybody takes action. And I tell people, I'm not special. I'm only special because I took action. I started my podcast. I listened. I read a book. And for dentists like you, I'm sure not everyone read the book and did it. It's just human nature. But when doors open, I've never had a door I walked through that I'm still here. It's not killed me.
Every book is an open door, and many people put it on their shelf and never open that book or that door.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but
other success secrets that we can model from.
Well, I'm going to go back to the shut up and listen. That's just not for a podcast. That's in your sales calls. That's in your partnership meetings. That's in your meetings with your employees, like your dentist did. He shut up and said, hey, here's what we're going to do. What do you think we could do to do $10,000 a day? Personally, your wife, your your girlfriend, your best friends. I had to learn this because I was not good at this. But here's again, I'm going to go back to the podcast. It taught me over the last now year and few months. I shut up and listen so much with more intent because it's in my head because I do so many shows and I do that. It's a habit. We talk about habits, getting up early, brushing your teeth, make sure you eat, drink water. That's a habit. So is serving. These are habits that you can learn. And real quick announcement on Amazon, I've got a serving journal I put out. It's $9.99. But what I did is I want people to track it like your gratitude journal. Go back and look. 3 weeks ago, man, I helped that lady with her groceries and she just hugged me like she never tomorrow. Is that going to uplift your spirit? I think so.
I like it. And the fact that you got something that people can take and use, and it's going to be a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
What is your company motto at the podcast?
Your network is your net worth. Interesting because I had a guest on that's a top branding. She calls herself a naming expert. And she said, I've never heard that before. You need to trademark that, which friends have told me that. My business partner, my digital card taught me that. But think about it. If you have 5 people in your network audience, how many opportunities are going to come? How much money are you going to make? How many referrals? How are they going to help? They're going to help. But I'm talking about growth. Now, let's say you have 500 people in your network. Those numbers grow. I grew my network a lot in 2023 by 1,000 people in the whole year. So that's what, 40 a month, 30 a month, something like that. It's not hard to do. And I've got tips to show people how to do that. It's super simple. And I'll give you $1 million tip right now to your audience. Go to your client. I teach all my business and I mentor this, and it works if they do it. Go to your contact list on your phone, whether you have 100, 1,000, I got 3,000. Doesn't matter. Figure out what you do and send them an email. Quick question in the subject line. It says quick question. You're going to ask, let's say you're a realtor. Do you know somebody that wants to buy or sell their home? Second question, I love an introduction. That's it. We're too busy. It can't be paragraphs. Just 2 questions. And we said quick question in the subject. So that's what they're expecting. 3 things happen. 1, somebody goes, yeah, my best friend was just talking about moving from California to Idaho. I'll do an introduction. Number 2, they go, I don't have an introduction. But when did you become a realtor? 80% of your contact list, family and friends do not know what you do because we never think to go there. There's a guy I met that is making, well, this is 5 years ago, making $1 million a month. He's only marketed through his contact list. Those 1,000 people, he went out and did what I said. And those people brought him 5 to 10 referrals. I think it was 20% he said. So that was 200 people. He's built this flipping home program that, and I don't know, I haven't talked to him in 5 years. I don't know, it's still going, but how simple is that? Because people love you in your contact list. They're going to want to learn. Not everybody, and you're not going to go to your grandmother or grandfather. And I still say you do, because all I'm going to tell you is, because the third thing is, I don't know anybody. But then you follow up again 3 months later. Hey, have you met? Because our life changes. We're meeting new people all the time. So it's a great way to follow up with that. And then you can do that on social media too, with all your friends on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, wherever you have your friends or connections.
Your network is your net worth.
Yep.
Or is it the other way around? Your net worth is your net worth.
Yeah, you can say that too. Actually, I don't know what they call those words, like auto. It goes both ways. That's a phrase that could go both ways.
Could be. I think it works both ways. Tell me, why would somebody want to be on your podcast?
Don't have the time. I can tell you how to do get your podcast produced in 20, 30 minutes. So it saves you time. Money, less than $100 for the tools I use and show you how to use them. And 3, the DIY. I'd love to hear people that have taught the podcast hosts that leverage their guests. I'm living it. My business partner's made millions of dollars leveraging his guests on his podcast. He's been doing it 10 years. So I learned from him. I know he's doing it. So
that's the secret right there.
Yep.
How to leverage and be monetizing podcast it's a gold mine waiting to be tapped.
If you're a realtor, do a realtor podcast, bring in other realtors, bring in experts in real estate. I mean, I could have a guy, and again, it's different with everybody because we don't know how, why, or when, but it gives that opportunity door opening of serving people, promoting them, getting to know them. Every time you serve, your universe out there is changing to the positive, which is how, again, I say a number, how, why, or where we never know. But I've seen these doors open that I never thought would open.
Opening doors is really a magical tool. Everybody that's a guest on the Influencer podcast can become a 7-figure earner if they just click on the little code right there, that QR code. But I don't ever tell people that. I wouldn't want them to actually know that.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. Well, that's and let's think about it. Let's break this down to simple terms. You have a business, you're a solopreneur, a CEO, a founder, doesn't matter. You're an influencer. What do you need? What is your commodity? People. You can't work with the same 5 people in your network, like I said earlier. Here's another tip. Okay, I love you, Dr. Bill, so I'm going to give you another $1 million tip. You meet 10 to 15 new people a week, or people you haven't talked to in years. That's new to me because you've changed. I've seen people make $1 million a year doing that. And here's break it down. So this week I meet 10 new people. I have these meetings. I bring them, I serve them, I help them. They're not all going to be clients, but guess what? I get in all 10 people's networks, just like my podcast guests. I get in their network. Lee Steinberg, sports agent. Patrick Mahomes, everybody knows, he just won yesterday. Big game. Everybody knows him. Well, I get into his network of other athletes that I could possibly have as guests. He never would have been on my show unless I had a podcast. There is no reason for Lee Steinberg to meet with me. And there's nothing against me. Just there has to be a reason. Again, the pain point or need. In this case, he had a message to promote. It's so powerful. I get so excited when I talk about it because it really makes sense and it's easy.
I like it. It's right on target with everything you're saying. So you're talking about clients, who is the ideal client to come on as a podcast guest?
Speaker, author, an agency, a coach. I like celebrities, athletes, especially retired, that have a great story. Meaning Desmond Clark, who played for the Bears 12 years. He's got a logistics company just blowing up, making tons of money. Marcus Ogden, who played for the Ravens. He's now one of the top. He got named the top 10 speaker in the world last year with Mark Cuban and a number of those people, which is huge. And he was homeless. He actually had the NFL pay his mortgage for 3 months because he didn't have any money. He eventually became homeless. A story, they have to have a servant's heart, a great story that 3 things I want to hear on my podcast. And you podcast hosts listening, this is important if you think about this. Inspiration, motivation, and education. Write those down. You hit those 3 in a podcast, your guests, you'll be able to leverage them more, and they're going to be super happy. Your guests are going to be excited, which I hear a lot. Oh my God, I heard this, or you motivated me here. I learned this tip. And it really makes it a win-win-win. Guest wins, I win, and the audience wins.
I always find that the guests like to be made the star. And if I ever go on a podcast and the podcast host seems to be the star, I don't feel like I've been served. Like I say, you got to be a listener as a host.
Yeah. Yep. That's the key. And if you don't think you can do that, don't do a podcast.
How do you find the ideal client to get them to come on to your show? And then the second question, to become your coaching client?
Well, again, I love this question. Let's go back to the podcast. Because I've done so many, I have 8 podcasting companies that are looking for podcasts because they get paid to find podcasts. I get 5 referrals to 10 referrals a week from these companies. Hey, Steve, I've got so-and-so. They've done this. They'd love to be a guest. And I'd go through it and go, okay, that's the person I'm looking for. So my ideal client's coming to me through the network of my podcast. For the coaching, I've got 2 ways. To somebody that's got a real small podcast, I can work with them individually. Or me and Josh have a program where we just brought on two very influential people that wanted to start podcasts. And they made 7 figures their first 3 weeks without even launching their podcast. So we've got the tools, and this is an expensive program, so it's not for everybody, but the person that's influential, it's got a big marketing budget, we can really help them blow up their podcast.
Well, you do have something that's to meet every need is what I'm saying. You got high, low.
Yep.
And is there a competition? People that do the same thing, teach others how to do podcast? There are, but again, I'm going to go back. I crush it because leveraging the guests. I can show you how I do it, get that servant mentality, bring value. And here's another tip, Think and Grow Rich, chapter 4, I believe, is law of increase. That's what spurred my podcast as well, because we were reading that before I jumped in with Pantheon, was with the coaching program. We were really reading this book, which I love. Just read that chapter, audience. You do what he says there. Look at Napoleon Hill. He met the top, most wealthiest men in the world at that time and never got paid. In 1981, I read Think and Grow Rich for the first time because it was recommended to me by my mentor. And since told everybody that I coach, read Think and Grow Rich. Chapter 4 is a major part of it. Yeah. There's no loser in the whole 13, 14 chapters.
No. And a real good tip is they just found Napoleon Hill's tapes, and the new book, which is better than Think and Grow Rich, which I was amazed by. People on the Side of the Street, I think it's called. But look up Napoleon Hill, people Side of the Street. We could put it in the chat or reach out to Dr. Bill. It's not as a thick book, so it's less pages, which is good for most people. You'll be blown away.
I hadn't heard of that, so that's good information. What about your well-defined product and service that you offer people as a coach?
Yeah, so a coaching program. I show you how to set it up, what software to use, how I do it, the steps I take, that once a recording's done, how I walk through the steps. It takes me 20, 30 minutes. I use some AI programs. I use some translation programs. They're super simple to use once you do it once. And if you're consistent with your podcast, you'll pick them up really quick. And then I walk you, through and listen to how you work with some of your guests and then consult or advise you. What do you say, Steve? And what steps do you want to go? Of course, shut up and listen is the good thing. And being aware of, and the other tip I teach them is have a pad and paper, then write things down as you listen. And I didn't do that when I started my podcast, which was a failure, and not a failure, but a mistake. And that's okay. That's the learning process. But let me close that learning curve for you. So let me flatten that out because I've done all the mistakes. I've seen all the things happen.
If you can give accurate feedback when people have talked for 15 minutes or 10 minutes and you're right in step with them, that means you're a good podcast host.
Yep.
And when you fall flat on your face, it's when you didn't pay attention and you go on to the next question like you just ignored their answer.
Yeah.
It does make a difference.
No, I'm going to test it right now. You just had your book, How to Make $10,000 a Day as a Dentist. I was listening and I was looking. And as a guest, you can monetize your guesting appearance. I can help you with that too. There's ways to do that. Edify the host. Remember things. Shut up and listen as a guest, as their tan thing. So it goes both ways, the yin and the yang.
Take notes and be topical. What's going on in current times.
Yeah.
What about your platforms? You mentioned that you teach platforms. You have a couple of favorites?
Yeah, I CRM is a must for every podcast host or anybody, especially we use High Level, but if you don't use High Level, it could be expensive, and we're using it for our group, so it's a higher end one. Here's another tip: Friday CRM. Google put it out, I believe. Just search it. It's free. And then you get your database. Because remember, you're meeting 10 new people every week. Got to keep track of them. You're going to follow up with them. Same as with, I was telling you about your contact list.
Mm-hmm.
You send that quick question email today. Well, maybe at the end of February or March, you send another one. And maybe you change the question. but follow-up's great. People don't want you to follow up. They'll tell you, and then you just take them off. Got a newsletter. Got over 750 in my newsletter, and that's another tip to have is a newsletter. I help you with that. What's powerful about that is people are seeing that I have these podcasts, and then they go back to my channel. I got 9,800 subscribers. It's pretty darn good. Again, I don't worry about the number. It's nice to have a big one because my guests are getting benefit from it. But a newsletter is another way to stay connected, to open doors. That's how I got my sponsor. I've got a little quote there. Hey, I'm looking for a sponsor, and I put a little verb in there, and the guy reached out and goes, hey, I've known you for years. I'd love to sponsor your podcast.
Can't beat that.
Yep.
I know I trained with Steve Orsher on podcast techniques and went through his training program and came away with the exquisite techniques that were taught. Did that for a year, but I didn't put out a lot of podcasts because there was one part that didn't fit me. And because that didn't fit, I just didn't do very many podcasts. I might have put out 20 in that year. Like you said, a lot of people don't put out very many. And then when I changed the format to fit me, and I've done, 3 to 6, 7, 8 a week. So now I've got about 140 of them in the past year. Yeah. And it all depends on, you get a system, you put it together, and it works for you. And so what you do is you with your experience, you short circuit what can be done. And you say, okay, if you got a big team, you can do it this way. If you're just yourself, you can do it that way. Sorry. And what I found is I'm doing it my way, singly by myself, and it's very easy instead of doing it in the big team approach. And whatever fits, right?
It's a great point, Dr. Bill. And audience, I want you to remember this tip. Customize it to you. I hear people go, I can't afford $1,800 a month for a production team. Don't do it. Oh, don't you? I said, no, I've never had a production team. I did do some marketing on YouTube because another tip I teach people is anything that you make, if you do get a sponsor or if you make money, take 50%, put it in your podcast. If that's your passion to grow it. Some people just do it because they love doing it. And that's great too. The other 50%, go on a trip with your wife, yourself, pay your bills, whatever you decide. Any business person, whether you have a podcast or not, should be doing that. By the way, podcast is a business and it should be treated as well.
Yeah, it could be a hobby or it could be a business, but it's sure more fun when it's a business.
Yeah.
Tell me about the features you like most about the platforms that you've recommended.
Simple and easy for the low tech people, which a lot of them are out there. I built my first computer in '79 when I got out of high school. It's in high school to keep sports stats. There was no internet, none of that. It was just a database. And I remember the green screen. And, I've since, I was a big athlete in high school and my friends would go, what are you doing with that box? Well, it keeps my stats. So I was kind of that athlete nerd, which doesn't happen very much. And I said back then, and I remember in my head as I'm doing this, somebody's going to make a lot of money on this thing. People are like, you're crazy. Well, we all are making money now. And
that's your actual studio behind you right there, isn't it?
No, it's actually virtual, but this is what you're going to see soon because I've launched a TV show. So that's now adding more on my plate, which means I've done some in-person podcast. Boy, what an energy. Oh my gosh, they're so awesome.
I used to have a radio show that I was on as a co-host, and we were live and doing those. And that's energy there because you're live across the world on radio. That's different. Podcasts like this are live. I used to do them recorded and then upload them. No, we decided to go live and didn't edit them. That was one of the secrets to our success. If you don't go the editing route, it's more pressure, but it's a lot more fun.
Yeah. No, I love the live. My TV show's live. I haven't done my podcast yet, but I'm going to do all my live. And it's great. Yeah, it's like I did a show on Friday, and I think we had 15 people listening. I got messages after, and so my oh my God, that was a great show. What a better feeling.
And here's a question that you've never been asked. What are the missing features that you wish you could add to your platform?
For high level, it can be complex. It's like going to a restaurant with 40 pages of menu. I don't know what to choose. And I think that's where tech fails. They want to bring so much value to us that they start loading on features. So a lot of my platforms that I use are simplified, or I help them, and that's where I come in, or somebody like me. You know what? For what you're doing, Joe, here, you just take this feature and focus on that, like I do with High Level. I just do the opportunity section of that to set up all my CRM. So simplicity has to be in tech. It's a must, or you're not going to succeed.
You know what I think is going to happen in the near future is that things like High Level, which I used to, are going to be impacted by the softwares that come out with artificial intelligence that takes away the complexity, and you just tell it what you want and it just does it for you. It's like using ChatGPT in your own personal product, and you become a regular person talking to a computer, and you get the results, even though you don't know what the heck happened, how it happened.
And you shouldn't care about that. Just know that you got a great result and move on.
Tell me about your 5-star client experience now. What makes it stellar?
What a great question. I just had Christelle just sent me a testimonial video case study, I like to call them. And she said she brought a guest to me and they loved the show. And they were so excited. They went back to her and said, find me more shows like that. So as a podcast guest, you can influence, let's use the influence word in your podcast, other people. I've got a couple of Christelle and Olivia that's their business, is finding their guest podcast to go to. And these other ones that I had mentioned earlier. And when I do a great job, which I usually do because I love what I'm doing, and it's now easy for me how I do it, you're just winning with everybody, influence everybody. And she just reached out to me and said, hey, let's reconnect. I got more questions for you. I've had people come to me and say, man, that podcast was good. My best friend, Mike, who was best man in my wedding, I love Mike to death, and shout out to Mike, is he reached out to me and he said, Steve, I just didn't know it was in you. I love how you don't talk too much, but you do intervene like you're doing, Dr. Bill, so well with your input. And by the way, did you hear this? Or did you hear what the guest said? And Mike's a very smart guy, and he's been around, and I appreciate that, and appreciate, comments from others. The 5-star experience, again, is the win-win-win. If a guest wins, I win, the audience wins, and we got a 5-star client experience.
Yeah, I enjoy having feedback, like you say. That's really what sets us apart. I was having a group meeting here Saturday for 30 people. Chris Johnson was driving down from Michigan to Florida, stopped off here, and we had a little gathering of our company members. And one of the things that we said as we went around and introduced ourselves to one another was how we met. And one of the guys said, and I didn't know him before, but he said, I listened to your podcast. And he said, you're important. And I joined this group because of your podcast. It's just a rewarding experience to know that you're doing something that feedback is good. People want to know, are we making a difference? That
is what I teach you. That's such a great story. Had nothing to do with money, but it opened a door for you. And, maybe nothing's happened, maybe it will, but it may open doors somewhere else by serving people.
Yeah, I like the way you named your company. Who are you serving? It's like that podcast would attract a lot of people, I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I've been blessed with when people see that, I think they would still come on, the Lee Steinbergs and Ivan Meisners and Dr. Rob Ray, who works with celebrity clients in child trauma. He charges, it's 90 days, 30,000. And, I'll tell that story. And this is another thing like your story, Dr. Bill. I got an email on Monday from a lady, and she says, hey, my boss saw your podcast. He loves it. It's okay. Well, I'm free Thursday. So we met. And I've never met Dr. Rob before, first time, and he's talking about my show, and I love doing business in the servant's heart. And he starts telling me about what he does, and he tells me a story where Britney Spears reached out to him and was going to write him $1 million check. He even talks about it on the podcast. And he said, no. I don't know if he tore up the check, but he said, no, I don't want a check from you. Turned $1 million away because his passion is helping people 100%, which his record was. He knew she wasn't ready and she wasn't in a position to be helped. And it's nothing against Brittany or anybody else. But what happened was after the podcast, he goes, Steve, I know some big people. Grant Cardone, I'm trying to go see Necker Island, Richard Branson, these names. He goes, here's my private number. If you need anything at all, you text me. And I've texted him a couple times. He's responded. He gave me some tips and stuff. Again, the podcast leads to these doors opening. Have I made any money with Dr. Rob? No. Have I been inspired? Yes. Have I been motivated? Yes. Have I been educated? Yes. So even the host can get that as well.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Necker Island story is always a really close one to me whenever I hear Richard Branson and that, because one of my employees that I used to have as a dental hygienist, she started a company called dentalpost.net and sold it, part of the Inc. 5000 growth company, and hangs out with Richard Branson on Necker Island every year. So it's like I feel connected to Necker Island, even though I've not been there. I did sail by there in the BVI on my sailboat one time, and I go, now there's Richard's place.
Yeah, it's an island.
It's a nice little island.
Yeah. Actually, one of my guests just put on Facebook, he's been invited. So that's why probably the top of mind in my head was, well, someday we'll see what happens.
How do you convert your clients into brand ambassadors is a good question.
Oh, I'm going to say a word that people don't relate to business is love on them. Mm-hmm. Love should be in business. Mm-hmm. Serve them, bring them value. People go, how do you do it? When I meet somebody, I did it with you, Dr. Bill, first time I meet them, I shut up and listen. I'm going to bring that back. But in my head, I'm formulating, okay, they do this, this person would be a great connection for you. This person would be a great connection for you. I do 20, 30, sometimes 40 referrals a week. Now, remember, I'm meeting 10 new people every week. So it gives me an opportunity to open those doors. That's how you turn them into brand ambassadors.
I think you probably got something to share with the world when you make that comment that you give away referrals at that level, because that's the missing point for a lot of people. If they're not monetizing, they're not giving away the connection points. They're collecting them, but they're not giving them back.
Right. No, that's a great referrals goes two ways. Some people freely do it. I know a lot of people do it. And some people are like, well, I'm not going to give them this guy because it's my guy. It's my guy. No, it's not your guy. It's share with the world your IP, your resources, your referrals, because it will change the world. It's if you're a faith person and faith driven, the Bible talks about that. Put that again, the seed, put that seed out there. You don't know who you're going to help, but they also don't know who they're going to help you. It's kind of tough to say. So it's again back to that infinity loop. I know we talked about it, but it's such a point people, FOMO or fear. Oh, Steve, I can't. Well, I'm going to serve 10 people this week, but I need money. Okay, serve them. But here's what you do. And here's another great tip for people. Their podcast, their business. You're slow right now. Here's what you do. Find business partners like I have. Hour a week, I'll campaign for my business partners, make a few $1,000s, a few $100s, depending on what it is. And what I do is, Joe, he's a business coach, one of the top. He's been at Fox, CBS. So I go through my list on my high level and go, Tony, Debbie, John, hey, I want you to meet Joey. Let me do an introduction. Here's what he does. I think he can really help you. And, I do 10 people, 2 sign up. That's a couple $1,000. Not bad for an hour's work. Yeah,
that's something that would be useful to do a little teaching on. That little technique sounds like a gem.
It really is. My business partner, Josh, he was telling us a story. He needed $50K for something. And on a Friday, he spent a few hours making calls, texting, and reaching out, and he made $50K in 2 hours. Now, he's got a high-end mark because people, I can't make $50,000. Okay, let's go down to, say you're selling Mary Kay. Everybody knows a Mary Kay. My wife sells Mary Kay. That's great. You're doing 30, 40, 20,000 a year. You need some extra money. Well, find other products or services, and you got to like them, of course. Like the person. and just go through your network. Again, your network is your net worth. Now it's making you money with somebody else. What a great win-win. Joey gets a client. Joey's happy. He's got a new client. He didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to market. He just got a referral from me, and I'm a win because I get a little, we call affiliate or, commission.
Excellent. Well, the brand ambassador thing can be commissioned like that, or could be goodwill, but it all comes back in the end, doesn't it?
It does.
Tell us what you're grateful for today, Steve. This is like the time to reflect on life and in general, but today is a special day. What are you grateful for?
Well, my dad always said, and he's passed in 17, and I miss you, Dad, love you, is, I woke up vertical today. Is that right? Yeah, I woke up vertical. I always mess that up.
Yeah.
How you doing today, Dad? I woke up vertical. So I always say that. But what I'm really grateful for is being able to get this message of serving out. And thank you, Dr. Bill, for having me on. Well, I'm grateful to be on today. I look forward to it because it's just another door opener for me and you to help change the world. So I'm grateful I can do that. I'm grateful I'm healthy. I'm grateful that there's people out there that we can talk to.
Now, if you look at yourself 20 years ago, I want to start giving a little advice to the younger generation, but what would you say to yourself if you were 20 years old again? What would you go do?
Yeah, first thing would be to shut up and listen. If I did that, I'd be a millionaire. I had so many opportunities. And then the infinity loop, serving. But the most important thing for me, and this is being very humble with your audience and you, is I thought I knew everything or had to know everything. So when people would question me, I go, no, you're wrong. And I was wrong most of the time. It doesn't matter what you know or don't know. I read a quote that says, if you know everything, it's a lonely world that you live in. So I'm now, back then, if I started reading books and learned more and educated myself, I mean, God works in great ways. I probably may not be here, but I would be in a better place.
How cool is it you said shut up and listen about 18 times? One of the secret techniques in the book is for the dentist to go in a room before he goes in the operatory and sit down and get to know the person as a person, ask about their family, ask about their job. Don't even ask about their teeth, their whole issue there until you know them. Just shut up and listen to them talk, and then ask them, what can I do for you today? Why are you here? And then just listen.
Yeah.
That's the way we start every new patient off. And then we went and figured out the dentistry part.
Yeah. And, as you're talking, my dentist, who I've known 15 years, he was a member. We own health clubs. My family did. I worked there. That's where I started my business career. And that's what he does every time I sit down. And now I figured it was because we have no, I'd hear him in the next room going, so how you doing? How was your vacation? And you know what it does? It calms you down.
Yeah.
Especially going to a big procedure. I used to hate to go to the dentist. Now I love going because he's such a great guy and it's great to talk to. And it's not as, it doesn't scare me as much.
Yeah, I'd walk in the room and I'd say, what's going on good today? I always want to lead with starting them off on a positive.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do to a dentist is go in and say, I hate the dentist. And that happens quite often, actually. So they express their feelings in a strange way.
Yeah.
So I want to, balance that out with the positive. And we got along good with our patients, and I enjoyed being a dentist for 47 years. It was a good time.
Yeah, and you did it well. And here's the great thing. Anybody can do it in any industry. Not just dentistry, not just podcasting. Every industry across the board.
Who's your living mentor now?
Well, Jeff Ramona, who's my cousin, is always my mentor. Always, I know I can go to him. He's going to give me honest truth. So he's been, a rock to me since 79. So what's that, 11? A lot of years.
And what business is he in?
He's now he's doing homes. I believe he's flipping homes, but he was the president of the health club from 78 to 2000, so 22 years, where I worked the 22 years alongside him. And he just taught me so much. And one thing he taught me was customer service. We came in the health club. Everybody knows health clubs, and they're so much different these days. But we made sure, and this is what I learned serving, that when you walked in the door, if I didn't remember your name, I just look at, because they go, I can't remember 4,800 members' names. Well, one, they all don't go at the same time. Go, here's a tip. And he taught me this. Just look at the computer screen and go, hey, Dr. Bill, have a great workout. Hey, by the way, we added, which I added and Jeff helped me with. Hey, how was your vacation? Same thing you do with your patient. And we gave towels and we made sure the place was clean. He'd get on me. I was the operations director. It better be clean. Equipment better be working. If it's not working, you get on it. And I want you out there talking to I walk the floor all day. And I'd be in my office doing work and I walk the floor. I want you to get to know and he just taught me so much. And then Josh Tapp, who's now my mentor, he's younger. He's in his early 30s. But he's taught me the podcasting world. But what I've taught him is this network. He goes, Steve, I don't have a network like you as big as yours. Let's partner up.
How good is that?
What?
How good is that?
Oh, especially when he adds this a week later when we met after I said yes, he goes, Steve, I didn't expect you to say yes. I said, what are you talking about? You're just sold 7 businesses over the last 3 years. You're a businessman I want to work with. He goes, but you got this huge network and you need to know that you could be bigger than me. That's what a true mentor does. And that's why I love Josh Tapp.
That's huge. Just very huge.
Yeah.
So why is being impactful, Steve, so important to you?
Because it changes the world. I tell people, I have my world, you have your world, our worlds have collided today. But if everybody takes their own little world and makes an impact for better, for good, and those worlds start coming together, like we do on a podcast and networking and all the different things, we'd be in a better place in this world. Let's change the world together. We can't do it alone.
Excellent, excellent words. From podcast host coming from the health center business, you're going to be remembered by a lot of people for a lot of things, but what do you want to be remembered for most?
My business partner, Max Lambright, I've thrown a lot of names out here. I love him to death too. He taught me something on a podcast. He's been a CEO 7 times. When you go to a movie, if you're a movie guy, me and my wife love movies. And at the end, you get the credits, the actors, director, all location, all that. I want you to think about what is your movie credits going to look like when you leave this earth. And for me, Steve was willing to serve everybody he can.
That's kind of like what was in Hard Rock Cafe, wasn't it? Love all, serve all.
God, I forgot about that. Yeah, exactly.
What about supporting you and reaching you? You need a way for people to get to your services, your podcast, your hosting, your coaching. How do we get to you? What's your website?
Yeah, you can go to my digital business card. It's infone.co/podcast or inphone.co/podcast, podcast. My contact info is there. Text, email, call, whatever you decide that you want to do, reach out and we can talk more. I'd love to connect.
Excellent. Well, we'll put that in our show notes and we'll get people to connect with you. And hopefully you'll get some great podcast guests to come on. I've got about 140 that I can winnow through and find some that'll be perfect fits for you.
Fantastic. See, this is live referrals right here. That's what I love.
Yeah, I have a really fantastic podcast host who I interviewed just like yourself up in New York, and he has connected with a lot of the famous people of the world, just like you have. I'd love to see a podcast between you two.
So love that.
I think I'll put a plug in for both of you together on that one.
I love podcasting with podcast guests or hosts like we're doing today.
Yes, it's a lot of fun. What would you say about your experience on the Influencers podcast?
You shut up and listened. You are the walking epitome of what that means. And you put your enough, we use 80-20 rule, 80% guest talks, 20%. You have to talk as a host. So you did that. Another tip too is I was on a podcast and the host was, so how long you been in business? Well, 3 years. Okay. What do you think about your business? I love it. And I'm paraphrasing, but it was just questions and then an answer, questions and an answer. So we got done. I was served them, I served them, but it had to be negative. Like, that's not what people want to listen. They want some input from you.
They didn't draw you out. They just basically did a flash.
Yep. Teleprompter with questions. Okay, next question. And you listen, my best friend Mike, he goes, you remind me of Larry King, which is huge. I'm not Larry King, but he goes, that's how you do your podcast. Think and watch all those people, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, whether you like them or not, they're going to ask a question, but they're going to bring their input. All of them do it. I watch them and learn from them.
Yeah, those guys are professionals, and they didn't get to the top spot by being dullers. They were engaged.
Yep.
You had to be engaged.
Absolutely.
Want to know, there's something you want to say to our audience, 195 countries all around the world, and I'm going to give you the spotlight. I'm going to take my picture off.
Yeah, serving. I've talked about it a lot here. Go out. If you get my journal or not, it's on Amazon. It's called the Serving Journal. If you don't get it, start. Today is Monday, but if you don't listen today, your next Monday that comes around, go ahead and every person that you run into, bring them value, serve them. But here's the kicker. Write down, after you do that, if you can remember, how you feel, how they felt. On every instance you do that, try to do it daily for 5 days. And on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, look back at all those that you wrote down. How did you feel with the whole group of people that you talked to? But I think the most important thing is, how did your week change? Think about that. Did you feel better? Did you grow? Whatever that is, I guarantee you something's going to happen in your life, because every week something's happening for me. So get better every day, 1%, and grow yourself. And use that podcast, if you have it, to build relationships and grow your network.
Excellent, Steve. Thank you so much. That's Steve Ramona with Who Are You Serving Today podcast.
Actually, it's Doing Business with a Servant's Heart.
Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome.
Excellent podcast guest, is always valued, and we hurt when we don't get the best. We got the best today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Speaking of the best, if you want to capture your freedom, capture that QR code. One of the things that we do on the Influencer podcast is make it available to reach me through this URL if you want to get a digital business card. And on that business card, I really do emphasize two things. One is the Influencer podcast. You can listen to all the different versions we've had, the sessions over the last year at drbillwilliams.tv. And you'll also find on our business card connections to my AI technology software products. The otrim.co is a URL creator for custom URLs, also for the QR codes. Now, Steve, we give away a lot of things on our website, and Otrim is free for everybody to build QR codes to make custom URLs. And we feel like that's our donation to the world. And among other things that we give away, email and many things. So that's available to everybody. Our flagship program, I think, is worth mentioning, that we'll have the world's top video conferencing software for you at OConnect. Why is it going to be the best in the world? Well, it's going to have the most features and benefits, but more than anything that's going to set us apart, you can speak in one language and be heard in any other language. When you're talking about doing a podcast to the world, not just to the English world, would that be a game changer? We're talking about big game changing when you're talking about having an audience of tens of thousands, not thousands, or maybe tens of millions. Could you imagine having 1 million podcast guests on one podcast? You can leverage that audience a little better when you can have their language being, what they're listening to you in. So that's kind of a thing that I always like to bring out to people listening around the world, is very soon we'll have the ability for you to speak in any language and reach the English audience, the French audience, the Chinese audience, the Russian audience, all from your basement down in your home. It's quite amazing. So I want to thank you guys, everybody on the Influencer Podcast Nation out there, for tuning in today. We'll look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday. We'll be back with another session of the Influencers Podcast. Thank you, Steve, Ramona, for being with us today.
Thank you.